Therapy student at Hawkswood School, and my presentation is on horticulture therapy. Horticulture therapy is any gardening or nature-based activity used as a form of therapeutic intervention. There's a strong focus on the interaction between the person and the environment, so this is similar to the PEO model, which declares that occupational performance is shaped by the interaction between the person, the environment, and the occupation being performed. Gardening is an occupation. It's both goal-directed and it is purposeful activities. It has several classifications within the OTPF3. It can be classified as an ADL, such as functional mobility, maybe walking through the garden. An IADL, it can improve health management and maintenance through the physical activity that is required. It can be a form of leisure exploration and participation. For work, students can discover employment interests and pursuits, so selecting work opportunities based on their interests, their limitation, what motivates them. And for social participation, gardening can be used within the school community or among peers in group therapy sessions. It applies to clients across the lifespan, but specific to Hawkswood, it can benefit children by teaching them responsibility, practical skills, or scientific knowledge, such as where fruits and vegetables come from, or different species of plants. For teenagers, it can teach pre-vocational skills for life after graduation. There are several benefits to gardening. So first, physically, it requires various body functions, including their sensory systems, specific and global mental functions, such as attention and memory, the use of the neuromusculoskeletal system, such as joint mobility and stability, such as range of motion, and movement and muscle functions, including muscle power, tone, and endurance. Cognitively, participants of gardening are attending to the task. They're concentrating when working on various tasks that it offers, and problem solving, such as deciding how much water is required or how deep of a hole to dig. Gardening has been found to be beneficial to children with autism spectrum disorder by exposing them to a new environment, which in turn gives them a break from the classroom. They can practice social interaction, and it also teaches them life skills. Gardening can reduce tactile defensiveness and may be given in a form of a sensory break. So, as I said, maybe a break from the classroom. Socially, group therapies can occur within a garden, which can increase social participation, maybe through parallel play when seeing their peers, or modeling behaviors within the garden environment. For example, a student can model how a therapist uses his or her hands and positions oneself to dig a hole. There are gardens specifically established to be sensory-based, and these are known as sensory gardens. A sensory garden allows individuals to experience various sensory inputs and experiences. It allows students to interact with various textures, sights, sounds, and smells. For example, lamb's ear is a very soft plant a student can touch, just as students touch the moss board in the snow-zone room. They can dig dry soil to feel the roughness or carry wet soil for heavy work. Students can also lift and carry bags of seeds or soil as a form of heavy work, or perform raking to organize. This slide discusses the senses that are stimulated through gardening and strategies to engage them. So first, touch is a big one because there are so many textures such as soft flowers, I mentioned lamb's ear before, rough bark, moss, or smooth stone to step on or feel. Strategies that can be used to explicit awareness to these textures are to encourage texture discrimination, explore new textures, and desensitization to various materials. The overall benefits of bringing awareness to the senses can mirror the benefits found in this New Zealand room, so this includes promoting relaxation or providing multiple or single sensory experiences. Also, students can learn from cause, effect, and discovers tactile discrimination. Additionally, the tactile board in this New Zealand room has many of the same materials that a garden has, but in a natural context or environment, such as rubbing the moss on one of the wall panels, and students can explore and discriminate between new textures. Auditorily, the noise of the bubble tube in the background can be therapeutic for students, and likewise the noise of trickling water can be therapeutic or calming in a natural environment. Or oppositely, the background noise within a garden can work on students tolerating noise when completing a task. So you're outside, you hear maybe a car drive by, you hear birds, a wind chime, the wind, trickling water. There's a lot of different auditory pieces that go into a garden. There are two types of sensory gardens, and these videos highlight one of each. So the first is primarily a sensory playground, specific for treating kids through sensory therapy, which parts of it can be incorporated into a flower or a food garden. What is important about the first video is the comment made about the impact the sensory garden has on children. So one woman describes that it desensitizes them to be able to tolerate and carry out essential tasks of daily living without becoming overwhelmed. More importantly, it does this through incorporating play skills, which for many children, play is a primary occupation. The second video describes tips to develop your own sensory garden. So it discusses the importance of all the senses in the garden for a child's environment. It includes ways to incorporate sight, taste, such as how planting can lead to eating, touch, as I previously mentioned, lamb's ears, a very soft plant, or walking on hard surfaces or stones, and the smells and sounds of a garden, such as making or listening to a wind chime. So OT has a distinct role within horticulture therapy. It's an emerging practice area and also is a way to expand the profession in a non-traditional way. So specific to the profession, OTs perform activity analyses. They will analyze the specific demands of an activity to create the best outcomes for the student by looking at his or her specific body structures, body functions, performance skills, and patterns. Upon analyzation, the OT constantly adapts, grades, and modifies the activity based on the client's needs and outcomes. Specific to horticulture therapy, this may mean planting flowers at a seated level rather than bending and lifting, or incorporating using a wheelbarrow to push mulch through the garden for heavy work. So they're constantly adapting, modifying, upgrading, or downgrading tasks based on their analysis. Further activity analysis also includes the meaning derived from the client. So the treatment could be designed maybe as a form of pre-vocational training. So for example, the OT may work towards enhancing a student's processing skills, such as pacing, attending, and initiating a task. Gardening also can be a form of group therapy. And again, the same thing, they just modify and adapt based on client factors. OT interventions continued. There are a variety of ways to participate in gardening. So, as I said in the first slide, horticulture therapy is focusing on the interaction between the environment and the individual. Therefore, the first, OTs can adapt and grade existing programs through the use of the environment, such as providing a flower bed in an existing garden, wet soil so it's heavier to lift, or dry soil so it's rougher to feel. Additionally, the environment can be assessed and modified to accommodate those in wheelchairs, standards, or gait trainers, so making sure there's adequate space or smooth surfaces for a wheelchair to be on, a gait trainer to be on, for all students to be able to participate. So there are a variety of ways to participate in garden annually, not only in the spring or summer when the weather is nice. For example, in the wintertime, students can plan what they will cultivate and nurture seeds prior to planting. Planting requires processing skills such as sequencing. And also in the wintertime, if students are unable to go outside, they can tend to houseplants by watering them, trimming them, making sure you put them in the light by the window. Students can also use crafting as a form of intervention to decorate the garden. So maybe decorating birdhouses, stones, wind chimes. This is all purposeful because ultimately it'll be used within the garden for others. Maybe if a student's goal is to reduce anxiety or create coping skills, gardening can be used as a form of calm for students to sit in or walk through, similar to how the snooze alarm room is very calming for students. So if they go into the snooze alarm room afterwards, they can participate in classroom activities without extraneous noises and just an overall calm that they get from it. So ultimately, planting and nurturing the garden requires various motor skills, including lifting, manipulating, bending, gripping, reaching, stabilizing oneself, and pacing. So this can be done in the actual garden. The outcomes, according to OTPF 3, that gardening can achieve are improvement, enhancing and improving the health and wellness of students, and creating a new role in their lives, so role competency. Here are examples of ways to modify the occupation through use of tools and supplies. So the first is a T-grip, which is a mount at the end of the garden tool that minimizes wrist grip and allows for full body leverage while pushing. So that is this one. And also there is a D-grip, which is up here. It goes lower on the garden tool handle. They're both designed to minimize back bending. Also, long handle trowels and rakes, as well as any long handle garden tool, can be used for individuals with limited reach due to disability or injury. Horticulture therapy and gardening complements Hawkeswood's current setting because there's no gardening program currently. And it also aligns with Hawkeswood's beliefs and approach to behavior management. So on Hawkeswood's website, they emphasize having a priority and a belief to increase function and spontaneous communication to be generalized in natural settings, as well as recognizing the benefits of external motivation systems to teach replacement behaviors. I feel that gardening aligns with both of these priorities and beliefs by creating a transference of skills and serving as external motivators for students. There's proven studies on the benefits of gardening for children with autism spectrum disorder and multiple disabilities. There are several models to support gardening. So the first is MOHO, the model of human occupation. And this just states how humans generate and modify their occupations when interacting with the environment. So it allows them to create new habits, routines, and roles. The ecological model discusses how the individual interacts with the environment, working on performing necessary tasks to achieve the goal. For example, the goal could be tolerating a certain texture in a certain context, which would be the garden, to create functional behavior, and this is when you see a carryover of skills. The social learning theory, students can work in groups to learn from others, so as I previously mentioned, group therapy can occur in a garden, which students can socialize, they can model peer or other staff members' behaviors. And finally, the rehabilitation model uses ways to adapt a task to facilitate participation. So this applies to gardening because OTs can adapt the environment or use compensatory strategies such as a raised garden bed or a D-grip or T-grip tool. Here are two theories specific to gardening. The first is the nature principle, and this simply states that involvement and participation is fundamental to human health. Involvement and participation in nature is fundamental to human health. So implementing exposure to students such as forms of breaks from the classroom is beneficial and will improve their health because it's a natural context that they're in. The biophilia hypothesis states that as biological beings, we instinctually find meaning in nature-based activities. So I took this hypothesis to mean that it's often instinctual to smell, see, hear, and taste because these senses are constantly occurring. They help us carry out everyday occupations, often unconsciously. Therefore, simply being and working in a garden can evoke and bring awareness to these senses at a greater level for sensory inputs for students, which they oftentimes need. Thank you for watching and listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at goebel.j@gmercu.edu. Thanks.